Hello and welcome to the Diregentleman channel. My name is Gus Zagarella.
And I'm Meg Tuten, and you might have heard about this before, but I got a master's degree in animation.
Yes! Masters in Animation Meg Tuten is here, and we're here to talk about a masterfully animated show, The Cuphead Show on Netflix.
Oh, hell yeah.
This show was incredibly fun to watch, and it looks really beautiful.
It does. I don't know if you ever played the game. I was a huge fan of the Cuphead game.
I briefly, played co-op with my brother over, funnily enough, two brothers playing as, two brothers shooting up a bunch of cartoon monsters. But,
Nice.
you know, I didn't get a whole lot far in it. I've heard it's really good. I've seen lots of cool things.
I love the music. I love listening to the music from the Cuphead game. It's just some of the best. It's some of the best music that I've ever heard in a video game. The great thing about the Cuphead game is that it was all done hand-drawn, pencil and paper shit. And it has, a real orchestra recording all of the audio, and then, it's just, their commitment to making it look period accurate is amazing.
It's such an insane, labor of love. There was a reason why this game was, so beloved when it came out, and it maintained that legacy long enough and thoroughly enough to get a Netflix adaptation.
Yeah, I hadn't thought about Cuphead in years. I was, a huge fan of it when it first came out. I mean, I went as, I went as Calamaria for Halloween one year.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, and there's a video on my YouTube channel where I explain how I did my makeup.
Oh, that's awesome. More of that Meg Deep lore.
Yeah, more Meg Deep lore, and also, I do have a YouTube channel, guys. I do. I don't post on it as much as I would like to, but, I do have one. Yeah, so I loved the Cuphead game, and I was really excited when they said they were making a show.
The thing about, them doing Cuphead at this time is that it seems like Netflix is building up a real roster for, very successful, unconventional adaptations of popular video games.
Oh, yeah, I mean, in animation especially, because you got Cuphead and you've also got Arcane.
And you've got, Castlevania is also another big one.
Oh, yeah, they're doing loads of, really good animated content at the moment. I have been knocking out so many Netflix animated series at the moment. I've been watching Disenchanted. Is it Disenchanted or Disenchantment? I think it's Disenchantment.
Disenchantment, yeah. This is obviously a dumb question because of the art style, but that is a Matt Groening thing, right?
Oh yeah, that's a Matt Groening joint. It's quite fun. It's got a lot of Mighty Boosh cast members in it, and I love the Mighty Boosh, so I'm happy. You know, you put Noel Fielding and Rich Fulcher in something, and I'm like, yeah.
No, they're seriously, building back up their library. I mean, Adi Shankar, who was the showrunner on Castlevania, has recently come out with a crazy show that I want to cover. Netflix aside, other than the fact that they're, killing it, this show in particular was one that, it just feels like a labor of love for animation itself.
It is, and it's such a, if you're an animation nerd, you have to watch Cuphead, because it is just, it's full of, callbacks and references to everything from the golden animation age. You know, Warner Brothers, Fleischer, Disney, all of that. And it's such a love letter to the art of animation and the crazy things that were being made in the early years of the medium.
Yeah, and it feels like it, brings back a lot of those techniques. You were telling me off mic about how they used, those 3D backgrounds that they could, place the characters in.
I love them. The company that does the miniatures that they use for the rotoscoped backgrounds is called Screen Oddities. They do stop motion stuff, but I think they also just do, miniatures for films. There will be scenes in Cuphead where if the background is, really complicated and there's a lot going on, it will switch from a 2D drawn background that's painted to a moving in-camera shot of a stop motion miniature that they track with the camera and then animate the characters and composite the characters into. And that's a technique that they used to do in the old animation. You could probably put a clip here of there's a really well-known Popeye cartoon where he is walking through a cavern, and it's all stop motion background, 2D animated characters, and it looks really good. It looks amazing, even for like something that was made in the 1930s, it still looks really, really good now.
Yeah, stuff like that. It really lets like the character designs like pop. Like I remember they had this one tracking shot that used that technique in Cuphead with the vegetable party that you're just going through the whole yard and you see all these like wild vegetables just having a time, spraying water into each other. And speaking of Popeye though, I love that this show brought back that classic like we're in a fight, so here comes a cloud that's gonna like roll around the room.
like the Sims.
Yes, yeah, no, that also like leads to the great characterization of Mugman and Cuphead, where they're just like, "Hey, why are we fighting? Because we're not supposed to."
Yeah, and when I love that episode because it's that's the one where they with the baby.
Yeah, and they have to protect the radio.
I love that. That episode is such a classic like Looney Tunes. Like it's such a stock plot for old cartoons that like there's just a baby that we have to mind, and the baby is very naughty, and the baby keeps breaking things.
No, that's been everything from like My Little Pony to like SpongeBob's like Rockabye Bivalve. Like there's
always
like
an episode where they have to mind a baby in every like classic Saturday morning cartoon. And they do this perfectly. And the face that the baby pulls when it's angry kills me every time. It's so funny.
Yeah. The thing that really clinched that one for me is just the extent to which the baby's antics were like them catching the radio and then the baby taking a hammer and just smashing it with like a blank look of joy on its face.
But I love the part at the beginning when Elder Kettle is like, "Now you boys don't touch my radio," and then he leaves and they start fighting and they do the whole thing of like, "Hey, why are we fighting, Mugman?" "I don't know, because Elder Kettle decided we weren't allowed to." And they and whenever they fight, like the cloud, like the fight cloud will dissipate and they will very carefully walk around the radio and then start fighting again immediately on the other side.
Oh, that episode also ends with one of my favorite gags in the whole show, which is just Elder Kettle coming in and like being like, "This is on fire, table broken, chairs in 3 pieces, ceiling destroyed," and then like he's like, "That all seems fine. My radio!"
They do a very similar joke to that on Disenchantment, where the king will will come back after Bean and her friends have like caused some kind of problem. The king will come back to the castle and he will narrate himself noticing things, and then he'll get to the thing that's messed up and then scream. It's so like there's I think in the very first episode they have like a wedding cake. And he's looking at it and he goes, "Okay, looking at the top, everything is fine. Nice fondant. Lovely, like a column work is solid. Now I'm just gonna take a cursory glance at the bottom, and the bottom says, 'Get bent, Dad.'" What? And then they do that with Elder Kettle, and it's such a good... There are so many, like, classic cartoon bits in Cuphead.
Oh, yeah. Well, I just love the archetype of character that Elder Kettle is. It feels like it's not around that often of just this, like, genuinely caring, kind old man character.
Yeah, and it's also a throwback to, like, for whatever reason, nobody in old cartoons has parents. They either live with their uncle or they live with some random adult.
It's very like Cranky Kong from like the Donkey Kong cartoons.
Yeah, but I'm also thinking that, you know, just like, you know, Huey, Dewey, and Louie, like, where are their parents? They live with Donald Duck. What happened to their parents?
That's the weirdest part, is that Donald and Scrooge are both their uncles, so there was a third duck brother who we know nothing about that they're never with.
Who is presumably, like, dead or something.
He has to be. He has to have been a duck dinner somewhere.
I guess when you think about it, those cartoons were all created in the 1930s. The nuclear family wasn't kind of codified until the 50s, so I guess it was more common to be, like, raised by your grandparents or your aunts and uncles instead of your parents back then.
Sort of like, It Takes a Village approach. Also, unsurprisingly, a lot of the people who worked on the modern Mickey Mouse shorts also worked on this.
I did notice that. I did notice that Carl Hadrika is a storyboard artist on a lot of the episodes, and I love Carl Hadrika's work. He did a very funny pilot animatic called Becky Prim. I think he also worked on Long Gone Gulch.
Very good show. We did a video on that.
We did do a video on that. I think there were a few Long Gone Gulch alum in the storyboarding credits, but I didn't really notice.
Good. Everybody who worked on Long Gone Gulch deserves to work on a lot of other things, including potentially Long Gone Gulch itself if it's ever picked up as a full show.
Which it should be.
It really should be, yeah.
Come on, everybody.
This show did a really good job. I know, like, Cuphead and Mugman are, like, pretty much similar to their game counterparts, but they did actually redesign a number of the characters that they put in the show. Ribby and Croaks, I actually love their show design versus their game design.
Yeah, because in the game, I think they're just wearing pants. They're kind of, like, dressed like a classic boxer with just, like, the like, athletic shorts and no top, and then the big boxing gloves. But in this, they're, because they've, like, within the fiction of the show, they've, like, reformed their image, and they're now riverboat captains. So they're wearing these, like, kind of, like, old-time mafia pinstripe suits with little carnations and the lapels. I love Ribby and Croaks. They're great.
That's another, like, I guess, like, Gus blind spot where I'll just, like, overlook everything. Not to say that it wasn't a good episode, but just, like, if you have a show and there is a boat and humanoid frogs and they're going down a river and things happen, I'm like, I'm too in to care about anything else.
No, same. I was obsessed with the Beatrix Potter character Jeremy Fisher when I was a child. I also love a frog on a boat. I love a frog doing things, doing people things and wearing people clothes. It's great.
Human frogs are, like, classic. There's this bizarre Frogger video game that, like, I've wanted to get all the way through, but I simply can't. But it has this incredible aesthetic. It's Frogger the Great Adventure. I'll put up, like, the image of the cover, and it's just Frogger in people clothes walking around basically like a Decemberist album looking for a princess. It's so bizarre.
That sounds great.
It should be. It isn't. It's a bad game, but, like, there's something about these very, like, cartoony worlds that, like, are just full of really fun, well-designed characters. None of it has or need any more justification than this is a cartoon world.
It brings back, like, pure cartoon logic in such a great way.
Exactly.
Because I feel like every cartoon that has been made since, like, with the exceptions of, like, Gumball and SpongeBob, most cartoons that are made now have, like, way more way more thought put into the internal logic than anything that I watched when I was growing up.
Yeah, you're right, because, like, there are other shows I can think of off the top of my head that, like, oh, there's a bunch of, like, weird gleep-glops in it, but, like, the show I think of is, like, Wander Over Yonder and Centaur World, both shows that are, like, well, in one, they're aliens, so of course there are a bunch of different things, and in Centaur World, they're all just different types of centaurs.
Yeah, and also, like, Centaur World has, like, an overarching plot.
It really does.
And a lore to it, in a way that Cuphead does not need to, I might add. Like, they do have the overarching plot of, like, the devil trying to get Cuphead's soul. 12 episodes, the devil shows up in maybe 4 or 5.
They don't, like, really overplay it, but he's a very entertaining character nonetheless.
Oh, he's wonderful. I love him. I love the design of him. I miss when people drew the devil as a creature.
Yeah, he doesn't always have to be, like, some, like, VTuber-looking guy.
Yeah, he doesn't have to be, like, unless it's more, we have him as a big man with horns and a goatee beard in a suit. And that is quite the stereotypical depiction of the devil. But, the devil design in Cuphead is great because he looks like he is, like, the 1930s equivalent of one of those old woodcuts of, like, the devil stomping down a wheat field in the middle of the night. He's just this hairy, cloven-hoofed, goat-horned dude.
It's also the time-honored tradition of having, like, a bad guy's henchman just be, like, littler versions of himself with, like, all of his little guys as imps.
All of his little imps. I love the one that's, like, the bookkeeping imp who's, like...
Oh, Stickler!
Stickler. I love him. He has such a fun character design.
Definitely. And so does, like, that main henchman guy.
Yeah, I think his name is just Henchman. He wears, like, washing up gloves, weirdly. Like Dexter's mom. He's always wearing washing up gloves.
Hey, I mean, in this kind of show, you just gotta wear gloves,
I love that. I just love... I love old cartoons so much. We live in this world where it's like, Henry said this before, but I don't know if if he's ever said this on mic, we live in a world where you either die an episodic silly boy cartoon or live long enough to become shonen anime.
Yeah, that's the big problem with like a lot of shows these days. I'm so glad that the Cuphead show, a show that draws so much from old cartoons, isn't this like heavily continuity driven, like deep lore, like everything has this like, you know, this is how the frog people conquered the swamps.
We don't need to know anything about this world. We just need to know that there is a little Cuphead and that the devil is trying to get him. That's all we need to know.
Also, just like, you know, in terms of like, oh, but it should be more like the games in the way they solve their problems, that would just mean that like every episode, once there's a conflict, Mugman and Cuphead just start going pew, 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 pew at everything.
And then until it dies. They're more like, they're very Bugs Bunny-esque characters.
And I like that. I like that they have to think on their feet.
Like, half of the time, they will, like, use, they'll, like, trick whatever bad guy is. But then other times, it'll be more like a SpongeBob deal where they just will be so annoying and so unreasonably lucky.
Yeah, it's always like a combination of either like luck or them like employing like, you know, cunning or trickery, like disguises or like emotional, like where they get the sad onion of the vegetables to kind of like make everybody cry.
I love the Root Gang so much.
They are so good.
The Root Pack. They're very like another time-honored tradition of children's cartoons is having characters that are just the Three Stooges.
Yeah, no, very much.
Because they made me think so much of the Boo Brothers from the Scooby-Doo movie, Scooby-Doo and the Boo Brothers, where they're just like three anthropomorphic things that are just, they're just doing the Three Stooges. To the point that the Onion sounds a lot. He doesn't sound like Curly. He sounds like a character that is like based on he sounds like he's based on like other cartoon characters that were based on Curly. He doesn't sound like Curly, but he just has that kind of like whiny like New York-y accent.
Exactly. Like they used the format, but they like really like you know, gave these guys their own characterization, and again, just the New York energy that this show radiates. I love that.
Oh yeah, it's so great. I love it because they did. That's another great thing about old cartoons, that everybody has Brooklyn accents in old cartoons.
Yeah, well, that's because, like, Max Fleischer, like, his studio was, like, based in New York. So, like, of course, most of the people that they would have in the recording booth would sound like that. And then it just became a trope associated with it.
I can't wait for Season 2 because I want to see what they do with all the other characters from the games. Because, obviously, like, it's a game that doesn't have any, like, dialogue. So the amount of characterization that you can get across for all of the bosses is very limited. So, like, the Root Pack, Ribby and Croaks, the Devil, King Dice. I want to see more of King Dice, man. Wayne Brady is so fun as King Dice.
No, and I love how he did a little bit of, like, a riff on, like, Minnie the Moocher as he enters.
He had his little Cab Calloway moment when he comes out.
Yeah, no, and then the henchman does it at the end of the episode, too.
And he just falls over.
Yeah. I do need to bring up something that's like a little bit of a bummer in regards to Season 2, but I'd be remiss to not mention it. And it's that Netflix as a business is being kind of dodgy about the way they're handling Season 2s now. This is not unique to Cuphead, but they bulk ordered 36 episodes, and they're just going to release them at their leisure and pretend it's a second season without giving the people, like, the pay raise and boost and, like, more protection that comes with, like, officially calling it a Season 2.
That does suck.
I didn't want to, like, leave that out entirely because, like, hey, even though we like a lot of the stuff Netflix does, we're still very critical of them as a business and of all businesses.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's not like Netflix, the company, is making the Cuphead show. I think most of the animation is done by Cartoon Saloon, who are the people that do Wolfwalkers and Song of the Sea and The Book of Kells, which are all fantastic, and I cannot recommend them enough. I love Cartoon Saloon. I love everything they do.
Definitely. And this is not at all a reflection on the people, like, making the show. They're the ones getting screwed over in this deal.
Yeah.
And they like, are still just doing, like, such an incredible job, and they deserve, so much better than that. I love the characterizations of Cuphead and Mugman just like as a dynamic. Like, I love, like, this is kind of, if Illumination doesn't have this be the way that they do Mario and Luigi, they, like, miss the point of the characters.
They are so Mario and Luigi.
Yeah. It's like, there's always, like, kind of the brash one who's like, I'm gonna be courageous, I'm gonna go forward, but they're kind of like silly, they don't think things through. And then there's, like, the more cautious, more thoughtful one in the form of, either Luigi or Mugman.
Notably, the voice actors for Cuphead and Mugman are actual Italian people. Their names are True Valentino and Frank Todaro. This is a better animated Mario and Luigi already than whatever Illumination is gonna do with Chris Pratt.
Yeah, I think that, honestly, they should can the whole thing right now.
Yeah, because we've already got Cuphead.
That's completely unironic. I don't think that movie's going to be good.
No, it's not, because it's Illumination.
There's just something about, like, recapturing the spirit of this, especially considering how many, like, people of color they cast for this in general, kind of, like, uplifting and removing the Fleischer-style animation from the more problematic elements of Fleischer. If you know, you know.
Yep.
We don't have to pull a, like, every time H.P. Lovecraft is mentioned and go into detail on that, but it happened.
We're going to assume that you know that the old-timey cartoon makers were a bit racist.
Things in the past were working from different values that were probably worse? Who'd thunk it?
In general, like, to talk about the voice actors again, I had never heard of half of the people on this show. The only sort of, like, quote-unquote names in the voice cast are Wayne Brady, who, of course, beloved Whose Line Is It Anyway cast member Wayne Brady. The indomitable Miss Grey Griffin as basically all of the female characters in this show.
Yes.
But the rest of the cast were people that I had never heard of before. There were a lot of, like, anime and video game dub actors. And Pork Rind is voiced by one of the producers.
He did a great job, honestly.
Yeah, like, so I love that Netflix, and they do this with Centaur World as well, because most of the Centaur World cast are, like, theatrical actors. It's so great in a world where Chris Pratt plays everybody to see some known names getting work.
No, especially when we can have, just because you mentioned Centaur World, we have the creator of the show, Megan Nicole Dong, literally playing Glendale, who's one of the major characters throughout the whole show.
Glendale. I love Glendale so much.
Whamawink, you made that magazine. Whoa, that was a little more
You made that magazine!
Oh my god. I don't know what voices we're doing, but neither of us really nailed the Glendale there.
I think I could, if you give me a little bit of performance, time to build up my performance, I think I can do a pretty good, I've done a pretty good Glendale in the past.
Yeah, I've definitely done better Glendale, but it's just such a sign that, like, when you go out there with, like, unconventional, like, voice choices, and, like, you bring in, like, kind of people who are maybe voice trained but, like, haven't acted in a lot of things, you get, like, a lot of really interesting stuff. And with Pork Rind, again, it's just like you get a very expressive, disgruntled, fun character.
He is so exhausted. I saw a great post on Tumblr that was like, hey, why'd they make Pork Rind so mean in the Cuphead? Oh, he works in customer service.
Pork Rind plays so well off of these, like, these dumb
he's
little cups.
He's kind of their Squidward.
No, I love it. He's like Gazpacho from Chowder a little bit.
He's so much like Gazpacho as well. And I love that, like, whenever you see him, he's betting on the ponies. He's a little bit like Moe from The Simpsons as well. He's like this kind of shady man. He's always gambling and, like, selling weapons to, like, mysterious buyers.
Yes, yeah, exactly. And again, two of Gus's favorite character archetypes are, like, angry man with eye patch and also disgruntled pig man. So you put them both together and you've just got, like, a real treat for the ages.
Yeah, and I am always, like, I am a big fan of merchant characters in games. I love Pork Rind in the game he had 2 lines of dialogue. He was the only, other than King Dice, who has, like, a villain song,
I think he's the only character in the game who actually speaks. And his audio, what I love about Porkrind in the game is that his audio is incredibly crunchy. Because I guess they wanted it to sound like it was recorded on an old wax cylinder or something.
Oh, wow.
So he has the most, like, crunchy, like, horrible sounding voice. But it's great, and I love that about him. And he has 2 lines. When you come in, he goes, "Welcome." And when you go out, he goes, "Goodbye." And he sounds like that, and my voice hurts from doing that. But Porkrind's great. I do love the little dream sequence that he has where he smashes Cuphead and Mugman with a big hammer.
Oh man, the slapstick in this show again is just like next level.
Oh, it's so good.
It's so great.
And they do something that, like, I am a big fan of The Amazing World of Gumball. I'm a huge fan of that show, which I think is and Gumball I think is a sort of like Gumball walked so Cuphead could run kind of deal. In that it is a similar, like, blended media. Every character is just some kind of weird creature, and there's no logic to it. Just kind of silly cartoon show about 2 brothers causing problems for everybody else around them. And Cuphead is another step beyond that, because they fully, like, lean into the old-timey vibes, and it's a little more cohesive. But I'm a big fan of Gumball. And one of the things that I love about Gumball is that all of the characters are kind of like Gleep Glops. Like there's like a balloon with a face drawn on it. There's like a CGI T-Rex. There's a piece of toast who's like stop motioned. There are like Muppets. There are all different types of character, and they get as many gags out of what that character is as they can in the show. And Cuphead does that. Like the telephone guy, I love the telephone guy.
Yes, there was also that toaster character that was in the middle of Miss Chalice's number.
Is like another separate entity from itself. And, like, the gag when, like, a Cuphead and Mugman will, like, fall over and all the milk will spill out of their heads.
Yes, the part where Cuphead puts, like, a fish from the broken fishbowl into his liquid.
And you could see it swimming around in his eyes.
Yeah.
That's such a classic Looney Tunes, because that makes me think of, like, when Sylvester, like, eats Tweety, and Tweety will be, like, walking around inside his skull.
Yeah, exactly. No, yeah.
My other favorite one is when they break into the cookie factory and they get the cookies and they dunk the cookies in each other's heads before eating them. Old SpongeBob was great for this as well. They got as many jokes out of the characters being sea creatures as they could.
Yeah, they really did.
And I feel like this gets as many jokes out of, like, whatever kind of animal or inanimate object or mythical creature each of the characters are. Like, there's this great bit where they're on the King Dice show. The trivia question is, what's the only mammal that can't jump? And the correct answer that he gives is elephant, and everybody in the audience starts jumping for joy, except for the 2 elephants, who look around and go, show-offs.
that like one recurring elephant character, is that Fagerbecky?
I don't think so.
When he screams the devil in the trailer, it definitely sounded like a little Patrick Star in there.
I kept thinking that I recognized a lot of the voices in the show, but I looked them up and I'd never heard of these people and I'd never watched anything that they'd been in. So I think they're just sort of vocal doppelgangers for other voice actors.
Funnily enough, again, when you include like new voice actors and things, you realize that like a lot of these specific voices can be done by a lot of different people, and it might be good to just give a bunch of new people work too.
Yeah, fair enough. Yeah, I do love. I love the Ghosts episode.
Yes, classic.
That is with all of the references to the classic like skeleton dance and all of those Disney Halloween shorts.
Another trio of troublemakers that the Cook Boys have to deal with.
They remind me a lot of the ghosts from the Haunted Mansion.
Oh, they are so that. They are so the ghosts from the Haunted Mansion.
That whole song that they sing is so Haunted Mansion-y.
Yeah, yeah. Well, that's the thing. Like, this is completely independent from Disney, and yet it recaptures so much of the magic from, like, you know, the early media.
It does.
So just keep in mind out there, that kind of magic, that kind of appeal, those kinds of, like, cartoon tropes, they never were the domain of any particular, like, conglomeration of capital.
Disney didn't own them.
Disney doesn't own fun.
I mean, what do you think about it? Like, the other great example of like a throwback to the golden age of animation that was recent was Over the Garden Wall. That's Cartoon Network.
Yeah. No, Over the Garden Wall, the other, there are frogs on this riverboat.
Yeah, the other one where there's frogs doing people things on a boat. Oh god,
Very
I love
good.
a frog in people clothes doing people things. I love it. It's funny because Over the Garden Wall was sort of a throwback to, like, even though it used a lot of like 20s and 30s animation styles, it was very Edwardian in its aesthetic and its vibe. It was very like based on old like children's books and greeting cards from like the 1900s and the 1910s. And then the Cuphead show is like a decade after that, because it's very firmly set in the 1920s.
Yeah, no, absolutely, absolutely. And you can tell that from, like, the way the cities are and, like, you know, the kind of carnivals they'll have.
The cities are very Art Deco. They go to the fairground. They listen to radio plays.
They go to the picture show.
They go to the Nickelodeon to catch the pictures.
Yeah, yeah.
And everybody talks like this.
And everybody talks with that transatlantic New York accent.
Yes, it's beautiful. It's a delightful show. And it is great. I do love the fact that, like, kids could still watch things like this.
Yes, yeah, it doesn't all have to be pew pew and, like, let's fight let's conquer God with our
it
Cuphead
doesn't
skills.
all have to be shown in anime. You can just mindlessly put on something entertaining and charming and cute while you have your cereal in the morning.
And that doesn't mean that this show can't, like, derive humor from, like, being a little bit darker sometimes. There's a whole episode about how Kettle thinks that the Cup Boys think that he's about to die. Yeah.
Yes. I love that one. And he's just dead at the end because he falls onto all those punji sticks and they're like, I'll go get the shovel.
And that's why episodic can sometimes be funnier, because if that episode, like if the ending of that episode was that we were seriously to take that Kettle was, like, super injured, then, like, it wouldn't be fun anymore. But because it ends on this, well, he's dead, then, like, it's like, yeah.
That is the great thing about episodic cartoons, is that you can just have the characters just fucking die and then be okay in the next episode.
Yeah, no, there was that classic Adventure Time thing from, like, season 1 where, like, they, it's the first episode with the elephant tree trunks in it.
Yes.
And, like, they go and they, like, eat this fruit at the end of the episode. It's like, what do you think, Tree Trunks? And then Tree Trunks just, like, vanishes from existence. And there's, like, a full pause. And then the episode just ends.
I remember that one.
And then, of course, you know, Adventure Time went on to, like, you know, give a ton of lore to what happened to Tree Trunks and the crystal fruit and all that.
You either die a fun, silly boy fun time show, or you live long enough to become a shonen anime. Once again, it's so true.
Exactly.
It is interesting. I will finish by saying that I think it's interesting to see the characters, because obviously the original game, all hand-drawn. I think it was digitally colored, but the pencils and the inks were all done by hand, like on paper with a light box, the way that they would have done it in the 1920s and the 1930s. But this show, obviously, to streamline the production, the animation is digital, but they add like film grain to it after the fact. And it's interesting to see the differences between, like, the pure, authentic, hand-drawn 1920s, 1930s style animation and the more, like, fluid, more cleaner digital, but, like, using those old techniques. It's just really interesting.
Yeah, definitely. It's pulling, like, the sort of visual panache of some of that stuff, but with kind of cost-effective, time-saving techniques in the modern day. It's not all, okay, well, in order to make something this fluid, you have to put your hands into the finger flattener, and kids these days should do that too. It's a combination. It's a give and take.
I think there's always a give and take when you, because I am a firm believer in the if it ain't broke, don't fix it principle, where, like, just because something's new doesn't mean you have to do it, because sometimes the old way is better. But
there is something to be said about combining old techniques with like new technology to create the most efficient version of the thing.
Oh yeah, totally. It's more like it doesn't really matter when the technique was pioneered or like what its history is. If it works and it works synergistically with the other things you're doing, then just use all the best tools and techniques to create the ideal product.
I think that's the great thing about the era that we live in, where we can just sort of like pull everything from every previous time period. Like, it's like we said in the Trope Tales episode about like Born in the Wrong Generation. Like, when I wish I could. You can do it now. There are people who just dress like it's the 50s every day, and likewise, like, people are like, oh, there's so much, like, everything's 3D animation. Disney's putting out 3D animation, Illumination is putting out 3D animation, DreamWorks is, but like, there are smaller studios, and if you want to be an animator and you want to do mostly 2D stuff, no one is stopping you.
I can't believe people who are all like, oh, you know, animation's all homogenous, this Cal art style stuff, and then they'll look at like something like Centaur World and they'll be like, oh, this art style's hideous, and it's like, it's different. That's what you wanted.
That's so true. I want to know what the Cal Arts people think about Cuphead. Because
yeah,
here's
totally.
the thing. When I talk about, like, I have talked about this with a number of people in the past, but Cal Art style is not a useful or true way to define the particular art style that people are mad about. Because Cal Art style, in the way that it was originally defined by the person who invented that phrase, John Kay, creator of Ren and Stimpy, not a very nice bloke, did a lot of really bad stuff. Back in the day, before all of that came out to light, I was very interested in his work, and I read his blog a lot. And Cal Art style, he was referring to the sort of homogenous, Disney-esque, like, more realistic animation style, because that is actually what they teach at Cal Arts. Because Cal Arts is basically just like a pipeline to put people into Disney. But, you know, half of the people, or, you know, basically all of the people that make the cartoons that people say are Cal Art style, you know, your Gumballs, your Clarence, your Steven Universe. None of those people were educated at Cal Arts. And I prefer to think of that style of animation as, like, new Rubber Hose.
Interesting.
Because it's sort of a weird blend of, like, 1930s, like, fluidity and, like, characters going off model and like, very, like, Rubber Hosey character designs with, like, floppy arms and big heads and stuff like that. But, you know, combined with a little bit of, like anime and, like, Newgrounds, and it's just basically, like, the old way combined with, like, the influences from the new generation of animators. And so I wonder what the Cal Art style people, like, the people who complain about Cal Art style, think when they look at Cuphead, because I think that they would be like, oh, it all looks the same! Little do they know that cartoons just used to look like that.
See, that's the funny thing. I feel like a lot of those people would just kind of give Cuphead a pass because it's from a video game, and the whole Cal Arts argument is just used to Trojan horse in other things that have nothing to do with, like, the way a show looks.
That's true.
I find it rather funny that, like, you know, there was that big hubbub about the He-Man Masters of the Universe Revelations, that new Netflix one, and, that does not look Cal Art style at all, but all the same people were hating on it, and a lot of those same people were out there, like, you know, being like, oh, Castlevania is this or that, or it's, you know, it's too woke, or it's a Berserk ripoff, even though it's a loving homage to Berserk in a lot of times. And I just have to wonder, like, how long is it until that Powerhouse Studios style of just, like, the He-Mans, the Yasuke's, the, like, Blood of Zeus,
the Netflix anime art style.
Yeah, how long until that becomes the new Cal Art style for these people?
Oh, it's happening.
It's so funny because it never comes down to actual aesthetics. It's always some weird agenda that they're pushing that has nothing to do with art quality or, like, actual literal art appearance. It's just like, is this an easy way that we can not sort of own up to our bigotry and just kind of point at something? Then let's do it. It doesn't matter what the argument is.
Yeah. In short, Cuphead.
Cuphead's a really good show. Cuphead, super good. Go watch Cuphead, and I'm sure we'll
support all of the people that worked on Cuphead, because it is shitty what Netflix did.
Exactly. And that doesn't mean you shouldn't watch the next episodes. In fact, do, because they worked really hard on all 36 of them. And whenever we see all of them, they all deserve to be watched. They all deserve to be good. This show is fantastic. Love letter to animation.
Yes.
Cuphead.
Cuphead!
Yeah! Pew pew! Pew pew!
Pew pew!
We'll catch you next time, everybody. See you in the near future.